What do Super Smash Bros., Kingdom Hearts, and Fortnite all have in common? Crossovers. No, this isn't some bad joke that you'd read inside of a Christmas cracker, but an actual fact. Smash Bros. Had its DLC fighters, Kingdom Hearts was packed with Disney characters, and Fortnite is, well, Fortnite. But how did we go from tasteful once-in-a-blue-moon cameos to oversaturated collaborations? Events used to feel like rare once-in-a-lifetime moments. They were surprising, creative, and absolutely rammed with fan service. But as time went on and gaming shifted, so did the way that crossovers were handled. Nowadays, collabs are constant, and while they're still occasionally really cool, something about them feels really off. But before we get into the games that defined crossovers, let's talk about why they seem so impossible in the first place. After the 1983 game crash, companies were overprotective of their property. Nintendo especially had built a reputation for overboard quality control, so the idea of letting other companies handle their original characters, let alone having them fight each other, was pretty much unthinkable. But not only did they approve the concept of Mario and Link having an out-and-out brawl, they went one step further and gave a relatively new HAL laboratory the keys to the entire vault. And in the words of Satoru Iwata, it was a huge risk, but they believed in the vision. By this point, HAL were already working on what would essentially be Super Smash Bros.' distant cousin. Dragon King was a fighting game prototype. It used basic polygon characters in a more traditional Street Fighter-esque combat style. But there was a slight issue. The game needed personality, and that's where Nintendo came along. The leap from generic characters to Nintendo's All-Stars came with fan service and massive recognition, but it meant that the game had to be completely redesigned. Once Nintendo characters were involved, they had to rethink everything. These weren't just fighters anymore, they were beloved characters with their own way of moving and their own personality. Let's use Mario for an example. Rather than giving him generic punches, they built his entire fighting style around his movesets from various games. His super jump punch couldn't just be a simple uppercut, it had to directly reference hitting blocks in Mario games, garnished with the occasional coin and maybe even an iconic sound effect. This was essentially the blueprint for every single character in any crossover ever. These early examples weren't just about making money by mixing franchises into a £20 bundle to sell to a 10-year-old in a battle royale. They were designed to create something greater than the sum of all of their parts. Smash Bros. Brought together Nintendo's biggest all-stars. Mario, Link, Pikachu and more in a chaotic yet bloody fun brawler. Mario could fight Link, Pikachu could be consumed by Kirby, and Luigi could kick Star Fox's ass. But this wasn't just a one-off. While Smash Bros. Shoved gaming icons into a battleground, Capcom was pitting comics against games. Marvel vs. Capcom would put Wolverine against Ryu, or watch Spider-Man trade blows with Chun-Li. It was completely over the top, but somehow it did so well that it even had its own competitive league. Each character was true to his own source material, but didn't stick out like a sore thumb. It was the perfect storm of gaming and comic culture. But neither of these games would be able to compete with Kingdom Hearts. Square Enix were mainly known for serious RPGs like Final Fantasy at this time, but eventually they wanted to combine their style with the storytelling of, for some reason, Disney characters. If you would have told anyone in the early 90s that you could fight alongside Goofy, Buzz Lightyear and Jack Sparrow, you'd probably sound like a lunatic. When they first brought the idea to Disney, they were pretty hesitant. They weren't particularly keen on the idea of having an innocent Mickey Mouse wielding a massive cleaver, considering this was before he was in the public domain. Somehow though, Square Enix pulled it off, and it was a pretty big deal. But here's the thing, early gaming crossovers were really rare. In the early 90s to 2000s, seeing characters from different franchises meet was genuinely special, and it wasn't just a weekly occurrence in an item shop. And the thing is, there was no social media announcements or instant reveals. You'd have to open a gaming magazine and see something like Mario and Sonic in the same game, and it would genuinely blow your mind. They weren't just making a fighting game with Nintendo characters, they were creating moments that we had only dreamed about. These collaborations were genuinely about making great games with an insane and almost obsessive amount of attention to detail, rather than just selling new content. But recently, there's been a massive shift in this perspective, and no game better represents this than Fortnite, which basically went from a cookie-cutter battle royale to what Epic calls a platform for entertainment. Fortnite has basically become a pick and mix of every single franchise they can afford. And there's probably no other game where you could see Darth Vader fighting alongside Goku while John Cena's doing TikTok dances. And to be honest, getting companies like Disney, Warner Brothers and various music labels to play nice and work together is pretty impressive. But over time this starts to get pretty stale. When there's an announcement for a new collaboration every few weeks, the excitement starts to wear off, and even though some of them are pretty well done to be fair, it loses its touch when it's so often. The crossover bundles that Fortnite and every other game releases prioritize cosmetic integration rather than mechanical changes. Instead of building cool new features, these characters get stripped down to skins and emotes, since it's easier to make a character look right than to make them feel right. And while it feels like we're in a pretty bad spot at the moment, there are already some pretty good examples at the moment of the original style of crossovers coming back, especially in multiverses. While it does receive new characters constantly, each one has a unique feel and playstyle based on their source material, but they genuinely feel great to play and fit within the game. I'm not saying to stop collaborations altogether by all means, but maybe there needs to be more time or effort put into them. It's a great example of the age-old quality over quantity idea. If we look past the idea of just a cool skin, we could have the start of some really cool and unique stories, pretty well done expansions instead of a battle pass. Gaming crossovers have evolved from rare, badass moments into something more commonplace. And while that evolution has brought both benefits and drawbacks, we need to appreciate that sometimes it's best to go back to basics. If you were to boot up Fortnite today, you might see Spider-Man cranking 90s while John Cena is driving a Cybertruck like a madman. These crossovers happen so often that players barely blink when Goku shows up to do TikTok dances. The technical wizardry to make this happen is by all means impressive, but has something been lost when these once impossible meetups feel as common as a software update? If you found this breakdown useful, give the video a like and consider subscribing for more deep dives into the stories behind the games we play. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.